Hi everyone, my name is Megan Flynn and I will be going over the first part of Chapter 3 from our OpenStax Biology 2E online textbook. So for those of you that have not accessed the textbook, you can do so at openstax.org/books and look for the Biology 2E textbook. This is the first of many videos covering Chapter 3. There's 5 videos covering Chapter 3. So to make sure that you're not missing any of my videos, go ahead and click the subscribe button. So Chapter 3 goes into biological macromolecules. So in the past 2 chapters, we have been looking at the biological hierarchy of life, starting with the smallest component, the atom, and then atoms making up molecules, molecules making up macromolecules, and so forth. So we're going to concentrate on macromolecules in Chapter 3. And these are the building blocks of your body. Okay, so we're going to first off in this chapter or this video talk about how those biological macromolecules are synthesized. So how do we take our small subunits and create a macromolecule, a large molecule from them? After we have the foundation of how these big macromolecules are formed, then we will go into subsequent videos on each individual macromolecule. So in this video, we are going to, by the end of the video, be able to understand how macromolecules are synthesized. So how are they created? And we're going to focus in on 2 types of reactions: the dehydration, otherwise known as the condensation reaction, and hydrolysis reactions. So by the end of the video, you should have expanded knowledge on these 2 learning objectives. So let's start out by first just defining what a biological macromolecule is. So biological macromolecules, well, macro, that means large, right? So they're large molecules necessary for life. And how we build them is we take small subunits or smaller molecules and connect them with a covalent bond. So again, in subsequent chapters or subsequent videos, we'll get into each of the following macromolecules of life. So we have carbohydrates, we have lipids, we have proteins, and we have nucleic acids. And just by looking at this list, you can already kind of get an idea of you are what you eat, right? Because we are bringing in carbohydrates and lipids and proteins and even nucleic acids, though we don't measure that, into our bodies through our food. And those nutrients, they get broken down and then utilized in our body to make all sorts of things, such as the cell membrane or the nucleus of the cell or the DNA. So all of that is created from the nutrients that we're eating or bringing into our bodies. So we'll focus in on these 4 major macromolecules of life in Chapter 3. But first we need to know how they're made. So before we get started in how they're made, we need to cover some definitions. So when I keep talking about these small subunits connect together to form a macromolecule, well, we call those small subunits monomers. So monomers are the building blocks of a polymer. So polymers are chains of monomers. And they're linked together, the monomers are linked together by a covalent bond. Now, if you recall from Chapter 2, covalent bonds, they're strong bonds. So that means that once we form a covalent bond, it's really hard to break those bonds. Okay, so this is what creates the structure, for example, of a carbohydrate. It's built up monomers, in that case a monosaccharide, held together by covalent bonds. Now, the way that we take 2 monomers and connect them together to form a polymer is through a reaction known as dehydration synthesis. Sometimes you hear it as a condensation reaction, but I think dehydration synthesis makes more sense because the way that we do this is we take these 2 molecules And from these two molecules, we take an OH from one molecule and an H from another and combine them into water. So essentially we're removing or dehydrating the two molecules to form that covalent bond. So that's why I prefer dehydration synthesis to condensation. So let's look at an example here. So here we have two molecules, and these two molecules are actually the monomer of carbohydrates. This is a glucose molecule. And we want to bring these two glucose molecules together to form a polymer. And to do that, we must dehydrate it, remove a water molecule. So we'll remove the hydroxyl group from this glucose molecule and a hydrogen from this. So by removing or dehydrating, we form water. And that will allow that carbon here to link up with the oxygen to form a covalent bond. Okay, so you can see, it's hard to see in this particular ring structure, but right where this the hydrogen and the hydroxyl groups combine, that unit right there is a carbon. Okay, so that carbon, and we learned that from last 2.3, carbons, they can form that ring structure. And so imagine there's a carbon here. So by removing the hydroxyl group, now that carbon is going to bond with the oxygen over here. Okay, so there's the carbon, there's the oxygen. Okay, so now this bond right here is a covalent bond. It's a strong bond. So think dehydration synthesis, removing a water molecule in order to form a polymer connecting the two monomers. Okay. The other type of reaction that we're going to talk about in chapter 3 is hydrolysis. Now, just by looking at that term hydrolysis, hydro, think water, lysis, think breaking, okay? So it's the opposite reaction to dehydration synthesis. So instead of taking two monomers and bring them together, we're going to take the polymer and we're going to break it apart. And to break it apart, we have to add water. So hydrolysis, adding water to break apart the polymer into the monomers. So here we go. You can take a look. Here is our polymer from the last slide. There it is. Okay. So we're going to take that same polymer and we're going to add water to it. By adding water to it, we're going to break the bond between the carbon of this glucose and the oxygen of this glucose. Okay, so we'll break that bond, and in doing so, an O and an H from that water molecule will link to the carbon, and the H from the water molecule will link to the other glucose. So now we have essentially separated these two glucoses from each other. Okay, we broke the bond in a hydrolysis type reaction. So you can think of hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis as reverse equations. So here is the reactant of our hydrolysis reaction, and here are the products. But notice the products are the reactants of the dehydration synthesis reaction. Okay, so we can just create a little arrow here, make it reversible to show hydrolysis in that direction. Okay. So we're going to watch a video. This video, by the way, is available via a link in your OpenStax Biology 2E textbook in chapter 3.1. So you can watch this video on your own if you like, but I'll go ahead and show it here.
Many important biological molecules are made of repeating subunits, called monomers. When many monomers join, the result is a polymer. For example, amino acid monomers join to form a protein polymer, and glucose monomers combine to form a complex carbohydrate polymer. Biological polymers form by dehydration synthesis reactions. As you can see here, each of the monomers in this reaction has a hydrogen, or H, and a hydroxyl, or OH group. In the course of the reaction, the hydrogen is removed from one monomer and the hydroxyl group from the other. The hydrogen and hydroxyl group combine to form water, and a bond links the two monomers. Hydrolysis is the opposite of a dehydration synthesis reaction. During a hydrolysis reaction, a polymer is reduced to its monomer subunits by the addition of water. In fact, the word hydrolysis literally means to break water. The hydroxyl group from a water molecule attaches to one monomer, and the remaining hydrogen attaches to the other monomer. In other words, water is used to break the bond holding monomers together. Let's do a quick recap. During dehydration synthesis, monomers join to form polymers, and water is released. The opposite happens during hydrolysis, where water is added to the reaction to break a polymer into monomers.
Okay, so that was a good kind of overview of the difference between hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis. So to finish off section 3.1, we're going to go through 3 review questions just to make sure we understood the 2 concepts here. So the first question here, it says dehydration synthesis leads to the formation of, is it monomers, polymers, water and polymers, or none of the above? So when we are undergoing dehydration synthesis, what are we forming? Are we forming monomers? Nope, because we're starting with monomers. Are we forming polymers? Yeah, but is that the only thing we're forming? We're also forming water. Okay, so if you chose this third answer, I would agree with you. So dehydration synthesis leads to the formation of the polymer as well as a water molecule. Here's another review question. During the breakdown of polymers, which of the following reactions take place? Is that a hydrolysis reaction, a dehydration reaction, a condensation reaction, or a covalent bond? So during the breakdown of polymers, so we're breaking it down. So remember, breaking it down, we add water to break apart the polymer. That's hydrolysis. So think hydro means water, lysis means breaking. So adding water to break the polymer down. So hydrolysis is the correct answer there. And then here's the last question. This is more of like a application type question. So the following chemical reactants produce the ester ethyl ethanoate, C4H8O2. So we have, you can see the equation or the formula here. So we have C2H6O6 plus CH3COOH. So what type of reaction occurs to make ethyl ethanoate? Is it a condensation reaction, a hydrolysis reaction, a combustion reaction, or an acid-base reaction? So what type of reaction takes these guys to form this? If you chose condensation, I would agree with you. Remember, condensation reactions, the other word is a dehydration synthesis. Depending on your instructor or what you might see in subsequent courses, even though I prefer dehydration synthesis reaction term, I have to know it by the other name, condensation, as well. So condensation or dehydration synthesis. So we're taking these 2 reactants and we're forming them together to form the ester ethanoate. Okay, so that was through condensation reaction. 2 monomers forming a polymer. Okay. And that's it for this first section of 3.1. So by now you should be able to to understand macromolecule synthesis, as well as explain dehydration or condensation and hydrolysis type reactions. Okay? So next, in the next video, I'm going to start the 4 macromolecules of life focusing on carbohydrates. So that's the next video. So that it's easiest to find this video in the playlist, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and I'll see you there.